coming of Islam into this scenario, Islam was to come starting in Arabia and then spreading into Africa. Your book shows two routes. Some of it spread directly from Mecca right into this area here, and some of it just spread through Egypt where Islam conquered. But Islam began to make inroads into Africa, and a lot of African people found Islam to their liking, and still do. But to understand the impression Islam was to make, you have to understand what Africans believed before Islam arrived. The belief was a form of pantheism. Now, your book calls it pantheism. I'm going to insert something else, animism. Different ways of saying the same thing. Essentially, pantheism is the belief that originally there was a single creator God, and from him all things come, but this God resides in every living thing and even in inanimate objects. So the river, you can worship the river because after all God is there. You can worship the sun because God is there. God is a part of nature. And pantheistic people, when they have to kill an animal, like for food, they'll perform a ceremony called an apology, where they, in effect, say, I'm sorry I have to kill you, but I have to so that I can eat. Pantheistic people, again, have behaved this way. Also closely associated with pantheism and animism. Now, animism is a belief that nature is God. Again, it's close kin to pantheism. The sun is God, the moon is God, the river is God, the trees are God. And you can cut down a tree and make a statue, an image, and that is God. Very similar to the paganism that the Middle East had. But there's also shamanism. Shamanism revolves around a priestly figure called a shaman, or shaman. And the shaman believes he's able to make contact with the spirit world and get answers to questions he may have. For instance, if a disease comes on, the shaman will go in a trance-like state, and often he uses a drug to get him in a trance-like state, and then they go and ask the spirits he meets, how can I cure this disease? And I want to say some of the cures that they have found through herbs are known to have some validity and actually work. There are some diseases that they can cure medicines, so I'm not going to say it's all fakery. Even though in no way am I promoting shamanism or pantheism or animism, but they have been effective in treating and curing certain people. Now, the African people also worshipped their ancestors, and they learned to memorize the names of their ancestors by rote memory or by heart. In other words, each African young person, boy or girl, would know, well, my father was so-and-so, and his father was such and such, and they memorized their ancestors back for many generations, and this ancestral affiliation helped establish them with a tribe. Now, a lot of these have been lost. That is why a lot of African Americans who convert to Islam will sometimes refer to the last name as X. X standing for the unknown ancestor, because their memory of who their ancestors were has been lost to them. Some Africans, though, still claim that they can recite the names of their ancestors back for 50 or more generations. But again, by knowing the names of their ancestors, they would join themselves according to clans, according to tribes. The tribe was a group of people who were related. Now, sometimes the tribe, a member of a tribe, was a person who had been captured as a slave during the time of war. Sometimes, though, he was a relative. All right. Anyway, into this scenario came Islam. And Islam in some ways conflicted with traditional African beliefs. Now, one thing that I must mention about Islam that I failed to during the 2 classes we had on it, Islam does not believe in priestly mediators. The Africans do, and this is one big difference. Islam, no priest. In other words, everyone can go to Allah directly without going through a mediator. The Africans said, no, to reach the spirit world or to reach our gods, we must go through a mediator, a priest, whether it be a shaman or whatever. And this brought them into conflict. In other words, the Africans had a priestly class. Muslims had none. Another problem was that Africans were generally, they had more than one wife. They had several wives. The Islamic people said, hey, no, wait, this is taboo. A man should not be allowed to have more than 4 wives. A lot of African men had more wives than that. And some African women had more than one husband. Again, this brought them into conflict with Islam, who said that no woman should ever have more than one husband. So some of these beliefs were challenged. Anyway, the Arabs spread into North Africa. They took over this region of Africa, and they still hold it to this day. However, there was one group of people the Arabs never could conquer, and that was the Ethiopians here. Ethiopia was a mountainous country, and one thing that defended the Ethiopians very well was there is a country of a whole lot of heavily venomous snakes. Snakes that were almost certain to kill anybody they bit. And this is, and you might wonder, well, didn't these snakes kill the Ethiopians also? Somehow the Ethiopians, I'm not saying they were immune, but they knew how to maneuver around the snakes or not be bitten by the snakes. A foreign army coming in, a lot of times these foreign troops would find themselves just bitten by snakes or terrified so much by the snakes that they would have to leave. So Ethiopia is also a mountainous country, and again, Islamic cavalry have just not done that well in mountainous countries. So possibly because of geography, and possibly because of disease and venomous snakes, Islam was never able to conquer Ethiopia. Ethiopia remained a Christian stronghold in this part of Africa, again until 1974 when Ethiopia fell to the communists. Today I'm not sure what is going on in Ethiopia, except the people there are generally very poor. Yeah, the name Africa is of Roman origin, by the way. When the Romans conquered this region, they called the area they conquered Africa, and that was, even though the Romans might not have been aware of this, how far south Africa extended. Anyway, Islam wound up taking over most of the Sahara Desert, and then began to make inroads here into the region of Africa that we call the jungles. And folk, I can't emphasize enough, the Islamic army simply cannot do well fighting in jungles. Again, the type of fighting that they learned in Arabia just simply has not been conducive to that. Now, speaking of jungle, you might think that a lot of Africa is jungle. No, only about 10 or 12% of Africa is jungle. This area here, the northern part's mostly desert. This area here is also mostly desert. This area in East Africa is a lot grassland. This is a mountainous, very mountainous region with, you can't call it jungle. Most of your jungles are right here in what the region of the Congo. This area right south of the hump. But that's given us the impression that all of Africa is jungle, which is not the case. Again, Islamic inroads have just simply not done well. They do pretty well in the wide open desert, have North Africa held it, but they did not make a whole lot of impression south of the Sahara Desert, even though their presence was there.